The fade out is gone. Dun, dun, dun.
Done.
Oh, man. All right. Well, everybody, we're glad that you could join us. Today, we're going to be going over, it's going to be part 2 from last week, which is kind of fun because you were here last week. I wasn't here last week. Matt was here last week, but he's not here this week.
Yes.
Dun, dun, dun. So we're basically shuffling the Three Stooges.
There you go.
But we have Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios, and I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works. And we will grab a couple of comments here. We have Bevy Jean checking in. Hello. We have Cindy King checking in as well. Hello. We have Minnesota Custom Made, which is Barb LaFawn, checking in, and some high owls going back and forth in the comments. We have TGM Custom Designs. Hello. And she didn't forget us. She said hi, Jeff and Justin. So I feel special now. You have Mr. Frank Dunn. Hello. Good morning. Across the pond, it's good morning. There we go.
There you
I'm
go.
like, wait, it's night. It's been one of those days that I'm like, uh-oh, what
What time is it?
Time zone? Yeah, a little bit. And Cindy says, Jeff, did you get your machine? No, I did not. No. I have a tracking number. I got a tracking number, so that counts, right?
I think Jeff wouldn't be here if he had his new machine to play with tonight.
I mean, I could be. I would. Well, I don't know. We'll see. Because it's got to be installed. So there's an installer coming out to do that, and I have to wait for the installer. Wait for the installer. Yeah, exactly. So we have Jesse checking in. Hello, Jeff and Justin from Cyclone, West Virginia, which I live in Iowa, and so it's the elementary schools are the Little Cyclones, the middle school is the Little Cyclones, the high school is the Little Cyclones, and the college is the Cyclones.
Oh, nice.
So one mascot, every level. But we have Marla checking in. Hello, and Frank says he got a firm date for mine. That is awesome. Can't wait for yours to show up too. You're gonna have to show me how to run it. So, needless to say, Justin was working on a Digitizing 911 last week. Well, Justin was, but I don't know where Matt is. So, we'll just let Justin pull it up.
Yeah, let me pull it up here. As we discovered last week, all the buttons in StreamYard are different. So,
you notice that too? Like I went to click on the brand button. So we have this little area that we can go play our little intro clips, and the non-looping one with the fade out is gone. So I was pretty heartbroken because I really like the fade out.
All right. So here's the design we're working on. This is actually the original file that the customer, the listeners sent in. So I guess we could just kind of go through a recap of how this one sewed out and certain things that we identified. It does start off with the fill of the ball. We did identify that there was no underlay in this section.
I bet you added some.
We did add some, yes. So we got the ball fill. And we noticed that there was a kind of a pattern fill to it. What's it called?
Program split.
Not a program.
No, it would have been a split. It would have been a pattern, right? Like a hand stitch.
Florentine effect.
Yes. Oh, it's curved.
It's curved. So the hat had some sections that looked to be okay. The one section that we did see was that edge was all the stitches were going perfectly horizontal. So there was some areas that had some really long stitches in here. This came down and did both hands at the same time, both guns at the same time. So we didn't notice that the fills were perfectly at 0 degrees.
I bet you changed that too.
We changed that too. And then the biggest thing too was because this section, the listener did confirm that this was eventually going to run on hats. So we did notice that all the fill colors were thrown down first, and then all the detail was done last. So we did break it up into areas to make sure that the registration was good. And as far as the text, we haven't got to the text yet. So where we left off, this is the file we were working on.
Okay.
And we'll do a quick recap. So we did lay down the global underlay, and that's going from center out because, again, this portion was going to be used on a hat. So digitizing it originally for the hat is going to still work on shirts, and it's going to prep it for the file to work on hats. So we did throw a global underlay down. And we came back to fill the ball. And there's the underlay on the ball that was needed. And we also saw that this section actually, it sewed up this way and came back into this section here. So this is, it's got the Florentine effect. I try to match that pattern. And it's going to also go all in one direction here. It's not broken up into pieces. And we did break up the hat a little bit more just to kind of get some dimension in there, get the different angles of the fill pattern to catch that light. And that section here that's coming around as far as the edge of the brim of the hat, we went ahead and did it in a satin stitch where it's going to, the stitch directions are going to contour that hat edge. So you didn't have those weird wide stitch up here because everything was going at perfectly horizontal. And if you notice, the sew sequence is a little different because I did focus on just doing the ball and the hat first. Came and did the eye, and then just the detail of the ball and hat, again, to ensure the registration and everything lining up properly. So that's all that detail there. And then finally we got into the gun section and the hands, which we were gonna go into. And also we did go ahead and change the sew sequence. So this side of the ball and hand, or the ball and gun, let's hide this. This area is gonna sew first, and then this side's gonna sew last. So we did break it into 3 different sections as far as fills, detail, fills, detail, fills, detail, again, for registration purposes to make sure that the detail lines up. Because what happens a lot of times, and even on flat goods, there is movement on the fabric when it's getting pushed and pulled. By the time, you know, if you're doing all kinds of different fills and jumping from the center to the right to the left, and it's doing the detail, by the time it gets to the last side of that detail, say it's coming around the right side last, that fabric has shifted a little bit. So you might have some gaps where the outline should be meeting the fill, but it's not, especially on the curved surface of a hat. Since you are working on that curved surface, there's definitely a lot of play in where those are going to line up. That's why I tend to do little bits when there is detail that needs to be really spot on as far as lining up.
Right. Now, those almost look like they're mirror images of each other.
They are. We did just discover that. I did went ahead and copied it over, slid it over it, and it is spot on.
Just a little bit lower.
Yeah, just set just a little bit lower. So yeah, that's why we decided to go ahead and we were going to work on one side, mirror it, flip it, and then it's done once you do one side. So that's always nice. Those designs that look symmetrical, and then when you actually flip them, and there's just one little thing that's off, something short or something, and those are always so annoying.
Almost symmetrical. That close.
Almost symmetrical. And the TMG custom design is the one that sent this into him. I believe their name was JR, if I remember correctly.
So I will throw in here too. One of the things that was mentioned to me was doing the texture on the ball, because that was something that he didn't feel comfortable in. I don't want to say he didn't feel comfortable, but he didn't tackle yet. He figured he would get the rest of it down. So I don't know if we finish this early, we can talk a little bit about throwing texture down on the ball.
Yeah, actually I did. And I was thinking that as well. I don't know. Have you done golf balls where you've tried to do the dimples?
Have I?
Yeah.
Yes. Have I been successful at it? I mean, it looked like a golf ball when it was done.
There's a couple of different techniques, and yeah, I think the hand and the gun shouldn't take us too long, so we can jump into that now. and then and look into some different ideas as far as texture in the ball. One thing I did want to bring up, just a reminder to TMG Custom Design, we are going to send you this DST file, and if we remember right, we talked to you about that we were pretty impressed as far as the skill level of this design for the little time that you've been doing this. So we wanted to see, give you the DST file, have you review how things are done, and then have you digitize it in your native software and post the pictures as far as how that worked out for you. So
now I am going to throw a wrench in your works here, Justin. So how tall is this? Is it under 2.5?
I believe we just established that the design would be done without the lettering on a hat.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
that section does work.
Okay.
And again, they correct me if I'm wrong. So, and I'm just hiding the areas. I like hiding the areas that I'm not working on, just so for any reason when I'm clicking away, there's not an errant where I grab an element of something that I'm not even looking at and I move it, don't notice it, and then when I send the design off, they've got this weird satin hanging out in the corner of the design somewhere.
That one time you accidentally grab a line and put a note in there and stretch it halfway across the screen.
Exactly. So let's lock that in. All right. So we've got take a peek here. So we've got the handle of the gun that's brown. The gun itself is gray and it's kind of a coppery orange, and then the white barrel and the black detail. Okay. So, all right, let's do a quick undo of what we got. Again, we have a fill that's perfectly horizontal, which I always say to avoid. You want to go, typically you want to try 15 to 20 degrees is standard. There are times when you go at a different angle, if need be, for a pattern you're trying to achieve or a look you're trying to achieve. There's different angles that I've used, but as far as standard, 15 to 20 degrees is typically what I work with. So we have another horizontal fill on the gun. One thing we did note that the barrel had some was a fill on top of a fill, as far as this section was on top of the fill of the gun. Typically, I don't like layering fills on fills, especially the one that has the Florentine look to it. Florentines, when they're changing direction like that to get that pattern, have you noticed that they tend to, in areas, get a little bit more denser than normal? So not only do you have a fill on top of fill, but now you have a Florentine effect that may have some areas that you're really hammering a bunch of stitches on top of each other. So we're going to definitely knock that out as far as the background here. So now I'm going to measure some areas just to see if fills are necessary. When you're digitizing, Jeff, how wide do you do your satins just normally as something comfortable before you start filling?
Well, on a shirt, it's usually around 6.5 millimeters, 6 millimeters before I start, because really with a shirt, you're planning on it being worn and, you're brushing it, the laundry. I tend to like to stay under 7 and under 6 if I can. On a hat, I'll go like 11. And I try not to go in. I really try to stay under the ka-chunk. So that's what, 10, 9.5, 10, somewhere around there.
Right.
But I'll go up to 11 because it's not going to get the same kind. It's not going to get washed every day. It's not going to get rubbed up against stuff as much. So I'll go a little bit wider on a hat, but for something that is intended to be for both a hat and a flat, I'll stick around 6.5.
Gotcha. So what I tend to do, like if I'm just kind of using this already digitized section as my artwork right now, What I tend to do is when there's something that has an outline to it, detail to it, typically it's black detail on kind of a hand-drawn or cartooned image. I always start with the outline. That way I make my decisions of how I need to adjust the outline if I need to from the art. And then it kind of gives me a guide where my outline's set. So any push and pull that I need to compensate for on fills or satins and all that, I can see how wide my outline is. And it kind of gives me a guide of where I need to stop short for push and where I need to kind of bring it out to for pull compensation. And Jeff, go ahead and interrupt me if there's any.
I don't.
Comments or questions.
I do all my fills first and then go around and do the outlines.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, touche.
Yeah, there's more than one way to skin a cat. As long as you get something that looks good when you're done.
Exactly. I'm going through here. I'm just doing the.
All right. I'm going to crack my knuckles. And I'm going to go through some of the comments here. So,
all right.
We've got some more comments. TMG says in Chromolux, the pattern is called a wave, so they don't call it a Florentine fill. They call it a wave. We've had Kingsbury Crafts join us. Keep going down. Yep. JR is my name. Hands and gun are mirrored. So that's good to know. It makes it easier. And they will definitely post a picture. So
awesome.
Looking forward to seeing that being done. And I'm sure I missed some comments. There's a lot of chatter between the viewers, which is great. It just makes it hard for me to find comments to pull up. But that's okay. I love that you guys are chatting with each other back and forth in the comment.
So right now I'm just kind of running through and making all my shapes. I'm going to come through and resequence, adjust widths, and these areas that have satin stitches that are extremely tight in here, I'm going to go ahead and do those details as running stitches. That way they're going to tend to not give you any problems as far as thread breaks.
And Cindy asks, where is Adam tonight? He is doing homework.
Oh, the dreaded homework.
Yeah, they started that this year. I don't feel bad for him.
You don't feel bad for him, huh?
No.
For shame, for shame.
It was bound to happen sooner or later.
This is true. This is true. Well, great
today he was making videos, so now he's got to do the not fun stuff.
What grade is he in?
6th.
6th grade. Oh, the good old days.
Yep.
So as I go through and I'm, again, just kind of creating the lines that I need to make the shapes and whatnot, I am kind of thinking as far as pathing and making sure that if I need to get from this side of the logo to this side of the logo, I'm not pushing my way out this way and find myself, oh, I have to end over here. There's no direct link to the part I'm trying to get back to. So I'm making sure that I am doing that.
Okay, Justin, we have a really tough question for you.
What's that?
As you are digitizing this logo, it's from Cindy King, do you take into consideration stitch count?
I always take into consideration stitch count only because I am production oriented. That's what I've been doing for the last 25 years, is production management. So I am always aware of that. When customers give me designs to digitize, I do have a form that's filled out that asks quite a bit of questions as far as what the project's going to be done on. So I can, if there's something that's going on a fleece sweatshirt, I know I'm going to use more density in fills or more underlay than something that's going on a polyester polo. If information's not given, or if there's information they don't know, I do try to kind of just use my averages as far as what I normally use as far as settings. And if there is ever a time where there's an adjustment needed, then I make that adjustment. But as far as stitch count, yes, I'm always thinking production wise. What's going to be running the most efficient? What's going to have the least amount of stitches that's going to give you a quality product? So that's just my way of thinking. Some people don't care. Some people say, I don't care what kind of stitches you use, what kind of density you use. I want them to look good.
I'm only making 2 of them. That's usually where that comes in. I mean, I think because I don't have stitch count on my mind when I digitize. But when I'm digitizing, I think of where the machine head is and how it's going to move to the next place logically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in just doing that, it's prioritizing like production time, because you're thinking, okay, well, the machine head is over here. I'm going to catch these letters on my way back to the other side as I move across, right? So you're thinking about that, but you're not necessarily considering your stitch count. And then when I get to the end, that's when I look at my stitch count based off of, like you said, what material is it going on? I'll start looking at, okay, well, now I need to adjust my densities, my underlays, based off the materials that it's going on. But as I'm digitizing, the first and foremost thing is that I'm going to save 100 stitches if I do this.
Gotcha.
I'm going to make sure that this runs through the design in a logical way, and then I come back and start looking at
yeah, I mean, as far as looking at something like, oh, if I change this one little thing, it's gonna save 100 stitches here. Yeah, 100 stitches is not going to make or break production, I don't think. But doing this fill at a 0.3 density with double tatami underlay is overkill.
Yeah,
and it's gonna add a ton of stitches. So,
well, and I mean, you can even throw in here. We saw how Justin pathed this. He went from one position to another position logically throughout the design. He very easily could have laid down all of those satin stitches and then went up and used the branching tool.
Right.
But the branching tool is going to add more stitches in than if he manually passed it.
Right. There's a lot of great tools in most software that kind of automates things. But I have found that because I don't have control of that, like you said, it may travel back and forth between spots that it really doesn't need to, which in turn, depending on the situation, it very well could add quite a bit of stitches. And it can even cause registration issues, because if the computer thinks the logical way of it is to do the bottom line, run up and do a bunch of underlay to the top right, do a section in there, come back down, then going back and forth, especially on a hat like that, instead of having a nice fluent pathway, it may even cause registration issues. So that's why, especially when there's a lot of intricate lines that are branching off, and then you kind of just group them together and say, all right, computer, you decide how it's going to sew. It can cause issues. Sometimes it works out perfectly, but it can. And because of that fact, and I don't have that control, there's a few times where if I know there's 2 lines intersecting and I just want to start here and end here, I might do it as a quick shortcut.
I mean, I can honestly say I've done red work where you only want it going over it twice, and I've used branching, and it's 3 or 4 passes of thread in one location, and then that kind of defeats the whole purpose of only going over it twice.
So now I'm just coming back, and I'm going to use satin stitches throughout the hand and the gun handle, only because I think the sheen of the satin stitch always looks a little nicer when you try to get some dimension and texture to, especially in something that's realistic, like fingers in a gun. You want to kind of have that light hit those. It kind of gives it a 3-dimensional look without actually doing 3D puff. but it kind of gives you that look. So what do we have here? We have the handle, the gun, the fingernails. Okay. So the hand was in kind of an orange. So this is where I was talking about as far as compensating, having my outline laid down already, and I know the thickness of these satin outlines. I know how much to compensate. The outside of this, or the end of this satin stitch, is going to push out towards the opening. So if you notice, I'm stopping short. I'm not coming all the way up to the edge of that outline. I'm actually starting short, so it has all this area to push out and still fall underneath the outline. And some of those stitches were relatively wide. They're almost 8 millimeters wide there, so I do give it a little bit of extra density and a little bit of extra underlay just to make sure that you don't have any of these stitches pulling out and kind of leaving a gap. And if you guys do see me toggling between different tools, I do have a bunch of keyboard shortcuts and mouse shortcuts that I use to toggle between. So that's why I'm not going up to menus and selecting tools up here. I have pre-programmed buttons on my mouse for satin stitch, running stitch. Wilcom also will toggle back and forth between whatever.
Tool and run.
Yeah, last tool and run. So if I'm using a satin stitch and I hit the space bar afterwards, it'll go to running stitch, and vice versa. It'll go back to the last tool that you're using, which is kind of cool.
All right, Justin.
Yes.
Cindy says, you had mentioned possibly taking out the center of the gun, the underbase. That's why I was wondering. And I think that's more for density issues than anything else.
Yeah, that's not, this isn't going to save that many stitches just removing this small area. That's going to save your needles from thread breaks or needle breaks, because this Florentine effect fill on top of another fill is quite a bit of buildup of needle penetration, so it can cause problems in that area. So that's the main reason I was doing that.
Because I know with some like smaller holes, it's sometimes just it's more efficient to run through them than it is to go around them, because now it has to think about going around. And Cindy says right there, bird nesting, which is another thing that can happen if you're way too dense.
Exactly. So I'm going to come back and do the fingernails, which are white. And another reason why I lay my outlines out whenever I'm traveling and using travel stitches that are going underneath a satin outline, again, it gives me kind of that tunnel where I know exactly I could go right down the center of that outline. And since it's already there, the outline's established, that's where it's going to be hiding everything. I know that I'm going to be hiding the stitches that I don't want to see.
Okay. You know, it's amazing. You can tell who digitizes for production every day by how fast they are with a mouse.
Yeah.
Because you're pretty quick with your mouse there.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm speedy, and sometimes I am. It's almost like I get tongue-tied with my mouse.
I believe it.
And I'm clicking way too fast, or I'm thinking faster than me clicking, and then things get messed up. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to probably just go back before I send the design to JR and fix any density issues or not. I just want to make sure we have time to kind of play with that ball too. So one of the things that in the original, because this white is on top of the gray fill, and the fingernails are tied into the same color sequence as the gun tip, I'm going to go ahead and, because it did the gray first and then came back and did this. But since you have elements here that you're like that fingernail that's falling underneath the gun, and then this is kind of, if you picture a muzzle of a gun, it's kind of the inside of the gun. I'm going to go ahead and do that section first. So I'm going to go ahead and,
I mean, I guess ultimately it's the satin around it that makes it look like it's under the gray fill.
Right. Where am I? I'm going to go ahead and delete this old gun since we've established the outline. All right, so if we want to go ahead and, so shortcut, copy that oval, turn it into a fill. And since we want to kind of duplicate that waviness to it, I'm going to add my underlay. And I'm going to give it the Florentine effect. Oops. See, my hand got faster than my brain.
It only takes once.
It only takes once. And oh, heck. How does that look? It's kind of an S pattern. So there we go. Start and thin, and this is kind of one of those, because I am duplicating the look of that kind of that pattern there. This angle necessarily isn't at 15-20 degrees, but with this small little area that you're sewing, it's not going to affect anything. It's not going to be detrimental. And as you can see, it did kind of compensate with that fill, and it is a little bit larger than that area because I'm going to come back with the barrel of the gun that's going to cover that area. So I just make sure anytime there's a fill, I always overcompensate just a bit, just to make sure that the two fills aren't pulling away from each other and cause a gap.
I mean, I'd rather have an outline off than a gap.
Yes. So again, compensating with that satin stitch that is starting short. Let's see, we got this part of the gun. I'm going to go ahead and do a fill. I'm going to leave this section of the gun and do a little bit different angle just to get some light hitting it differently. So it kind of looks like
like a barrel.
I guess it's the start of the barrel there, isn't it? This angle a little bit, and that was not a fill stitch. With my brain again. Underlay. So we have this one that's about 20 degrees there. Just kind of fixing that outline. Come back down, a little bit different angle to get a little bit of sheen. So instead of just having the whole gun, what did I do here? Instead of the whole gun just coming in one fill, which is perfectly fine, it gets the job done. I just like breaking up elements. It just gives you that much more definition and dimension to the design. And so there's different sheens that you're going to have at different angles. Just looking in this true view, you can see the light is hitting it differently. So it kind of gives it the look that there is kind of some dimensions on that, the steel of the gun. And one thing we did mention as far as that fill on top of fill over here in this section, one thing I'm combating it just to make sure that there's no overlap of fill and to kind of give it some dimension between these two outlines is I'm actually going to come back here and do a satin for the edge of the barrel. So it kind of gives it that kind of that rounded finish that a barrel would have. Not in the fill. All right, so that's the difference between the two. We corrected the overlapping of the fills down here. Did a little bit different in the detail as far as some running stitch detail. The sequencing is a little bit different where the white section is done before the gray. This is tucked up underneath. And as you can see, this does kind of give you a little bit more dimension, kind of gives it a little bit more realistic 3D effect coming at you. So that's the way I approach it. Again, having just all one fill for the gray area, it's not like it's not right to do. I just like having a little bit more fun with my designs.
You got to keep it interesting, right?
Exactly.
And CC says, I think that looks really good. The satin on the barrel.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. So I'm going to try to find the old gun here. I guess I could lock this. Delete that old one. Unhide all. And there we go. The before and the after. And again, remembering what the sew out looked like, this wasn't one like we've seen some Digitizing 911s where people are having some really hard issues that it's not sewing well at all. And we could find designs where you and I, when we look through it and discuss it, we're like, yeah, this basically needs to be redone. I mean, I know I pretty much redid this one. It wasn't necessary to be redone, in my opinion. I just did it in some different ways to correct the areas that were problematic, and just some pointers to kind of a newbie that, you know, they can see just to kind of jazz up their designs and make them a little bit more fun.
Well, and I will say, Ramona's right. No three people are going to draw the Mona Lisa exactly the same, but they will all be
exactly. So let's get into some ball texture, shall we?
Well, I mean, did you want to go over the text?
Oh, yeah. I forgot.
I mean, I looking at the text, the upper text to me looks okay. The only thing I would change on the lower text is there doesn't seem to be any push compensation.
Correct. So, push and pull compensation, really quick, just for those that don't know. The areas that have the open end of a satin stitch, like the bottom, top and bottom of this H, those are actually, you could actually even see those aren't even without compensation. But when these actually sew, they're going to actually look more like this, where it's going to push out more than your horizontal pieces of your design, because that thread is going to push out with the density you're using. So anything that has the open ends, and I'm kind of exaggerating this, but they're going to sew out like this. So when it's on screen and it's actually perfectly level here from something that's sitting horizontal, and the next piece is sitting perfectly vertical, that vertical one's going to push out, that horizontal one's going to pull in. So your lettering is going to be stepping up and down when it's sewn.
And you'll see it. And especially when it's text, because it's something that your eye goes to pretty
identifiable. It's something that you're going to read, and so it's going to be a lot more evident that if it was just like some two random detail lines of a design, one may not know that that line's not supposed to be higher than the line next to it. When it's text, it's definitely going to be something where you need to compensate for. I like throwing guidelines down, so that kind of gives you the top and bottom of where the horizontal pieces are going to be for the pull in, and then I'll go in with, I usually go about 0.5 millimeter and go inwards, and that's going to be my guideline to where.
So Cindy actually has a really good question, and maybe TMG can answer that. Is that stock lettering? And I'm leaning towards yes, it is, because from what I see, the majority of stock lettering doesn't compensate for push. Mm-hmm. So it's always something that when I do use a stock lettering, I go in and I adjust the push for that. And I think you do the same, Justin.
I do, yeah. There's certain fonts and certain softwares and stuff that have it seems like they do a little sometimes, but a lot of times, depending, again, it's all relative to the size of the text too. I mean, if you're dealing with bigger text, then you're going to be dealing with more densities and more underlays. You might have a little bit more push. If you're working with teeny tiny text, you don't want to reducing something at 0.5 millimeter and 0.5 millimeter top and bottom. That's reducing it a whole millimeter. You're not going to need to reduce it that much. So
it depends on the font too, because if it's like a serif font where you end up with satin and everything runs like the top crossbar of the T there, then you don't really have to worry that much about push, except for push into the next letter.
Right. Exactly.
And so TMG Custom Design said yes, it's stock lettering. And Cindy asked, is that what Justin is doing now? Push pull comp. So he's compensating for the push. I don't think you're compensating for the pull because you're just setting it as the pull is.
Yeah, I'm using kind of the pull as the standard. So I'm dropping everything that's going to push. So when it does push and pull, it's going to meet each other. So one thing that will come when you do set these guides, your drawing lines are actually going to snap to the guides as you move them around. So that's, that it's pretty much spot on, even with all the rest of them, whether you're just kind of grabbing sections and moving them with your shaping tool, or if you actually grab nodes like this, it'll snap to that. And all these weird kind of nodes in here, I guarantee you that's because we are dealing with a DST file that was saved outside of a chroma file, and sometimes you get these weird nodes and angles and stuff like that. So quickly look at this, get rid of the guide so you can't see it. So on screen, it actually
I was gonna say, I think you have some travel stitches poking out.
Yeah. These weird stitches up here. Yeah, for some reason it's
bonus stitches.
Throwing these weird, they are travel stitches. I think it's just the start and stop that's getting kind of funky on me. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, whenever there's a stitch file that's saved out of a DST out of another file, there is sometimes where a column, instead of if you grab the satin, it's not grabbing all the travel or the running stitches involved, the jump stitches here. So it may kind of leave the tie-in stitches are by themselves. So all this stuff's kind of maybe leaving some weird stuff, but
artifacts. We'll call them artifacts.
Yes, artifacts. But yeah, anything horizontal should be a little bit higher than there. TrueView also adds a little oomph to them. So, but so if you can see, like the top of the H's look lower than the T and the E. The bottom of the R, I, V is going to be higher than the bottom of the E's. So that's just going to compensate. I'll go in and fix this lettering. cleaner for the file we send them. But the top text, again, because if it's because it's at a in an arc, and you really don't have much open columns. I mean, the ends of these points are kind of open, but when you come down to a V, a tip, it doesn't push out as much, I've noticed. And again, this is kind of one of those fonts where you do have kind of the H is kind of peaked out, the T's, just the makeup of this particular font. It already has those kind of quirks to it, so you're not going to see like you see that bottom text where it's perfectly horizontal. It's a regular bold Arial font. Those push and pulls are going to be really evident next to something like that font where it's already kind of got these weird peaks and stuff in them. All right.
I'll let you move on, Justin. He'll throw stuff at me later.
I'm assuming the Florentine effect or the curved effect was used in lieu of trying to get that ball shape. There are certain softwares where you could actually set pattern fills. When I'm kind of doing an instructional thing like this, I don't like to do specific features to a software, because if Wilcom, you can do a pattern fill and I could just tell it to do an oval or a circle at this size and this many, this space, and just click a button, it just kind of gives you the pattern. But, that might not be a feature in Chroma or another software that someone's using. So a couple different ways that I've done a ball.
Do you have, oh, you don't have the artwork in there?
I don't. I know Matt tried to give it to me a while ago or last time, but one way I've done it is I go ahead and do the fill, and I'm just going to use this fancy tool to kind of.
And there you go. Yes, wave pattern, because I didn't like how my dimples looked. Okay.
So I'm going to use this circle tool to kind of do, and typically I don't do perfect circles when I'm trying to do the dimples on a ball. But because I'm going white on white, you don't have to get real dense with the density either. And underlay is not really needed. And sometimes I can come back and do kind of this angle. Again, there's different tools in certain softwares. Like you can grab this ball or this circle and you can array in certain software. So you could say, I want it this many across with this spacing, this many down, different angles and stuff like that. But just a quick way to show, I'm going to copy kind of this circle pattern where, trying to think of a golf ball, it's basically indentations, and then you kind of have the surface area that's in between those indentations.
And Cindy just asked, is this a golf ball or a baseball? It is a golf ball.
It is a golf ball.
See, now I'd have done it completely different.
I'm just going through different ways that I've done it in the past. So if you look at this, and this was white on white, that's one way you can kind of get a dimple look to it, because you have the fill stitches that are flat in between, and then you got this pattern that kind of looks like circles throughout. So that's one way that I've done before. I am going to cheat just for sake of showing something. And these are always going to be done by hand, but using a motif, a lot of softwares do use that. But this could always be digitized by hand and change the color so you can see it. You could always come through and find a motif that kind of has a oval or circular pattern to it.
Yeah, I think they even have those knots that you were putting, the French knots. I think they have.
Oh, do they?
Motif too, yeah.
Let's see, circles, no. Circles, no. That's kind of neat, but golf balls don't have different sizes.
This is where you find the fun stuff in your software.
Exactly. Do you know offhand, Jeff, if Chroma has a motif?
They
option?
do. The motifs that are in there, I don't know. And Cindy says, but with that, how many trims do you end up with? And I believe that was to all the individual dots that you have.
I would have gone through and done closest point connection. I wouldn't have trimmed all those. So this is kind of an option. I know it's not, it's got kind of weird pointy, but you got to remember this is white on white. So it is kind of gives that kind of that appearance of a curved look if you're thinking of circles that are going to be kind of different shaped when you're looking at it.
And see, this is too. That's a square motif, and you have it on a curved fill, so it's curving those around.
Well, it's this weird like rope type pattern that I chose here. It's this kind of pointed.
You're like, which one?
Yeah, they don't have just a regular circle one. But just to show you, that's
that right there. The circle 01 looks filled in.
There's that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go with that one.
Yeah, and that's another thing with as far as Wilcom's concerned. However, the density was programmed to create that motif, you're stuck with that density. So if that's, that pattern is used to sew on its own and be dense enough to not have anything showing through. So again, you're adding a lot of stitches. You have a lot of stitches on top of that fill. So that might cause some problems. So if you were going to do something like that, I would definitely do it manually. So you can set these balls, since it's white on white, you could set the circles with a lot less density.
Yeah. And Ramona makes a good point. And remember, you'll be looking at the stitch out from a distance. You just want to imply that there's dimples.
Exactly. And that's why I think something like this is not going to drive your stitch count up that much. Let's see, 21,900. So it added what?
1,000 stitches.
1,000 stitches. So, I mean, you can see how many Wilcom has as far as preset ones, and there's some custom ones that we've done. For instance, like this heart. But that just kind of gives you an idea of like Ramona said, you're just trying to imply some type of texture in there. So for stitch count's sake, and because there also you need to worry about, there are elements on the face itself that you don't want to take away from.
See, and that's generally how I've done it, is I'll do like a mesh, really open fill, curve it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's even a way that we can give it a globe effect. But that's how I usually do dimples when I do them on a golf ball, is I'll do run stitches. And
what Jeff is pretty much saying is you do a fill, you open up the density.
Yeah, I do the mesh fill.
Oh, do you?
One to the right. The other right. There you go.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
And then throw, like a trapunto on it so that it travels on the edge, and then globe shape it like it would be a ball, and boom.
Wonder why it's not allowing me to.
Probably.
Probably because I had. Did it say the Florentine effect? No, it didn't. That's weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something you could even do manually.
And usually like I'll lay a template like that down on top and then I'll run manually over it so I can control the pathing, and it does the weird stuff like that sometimes.
Right.
But yeah, something where.
So there's the trim pointer with that one. So like you want to just kind of, actually you might want to get rid of that Florentine effect for this part. I'm going to open it up. I do it opposite way. So maybe even something like that.
Yeah, just something to give it that effect that it's got.
Yeah, just so it kind of gives it texture and it kind of gives that ball look. This would be the fastest way as far as just kind of using the open fill and using the 2 different angles to kind of use that pattern, make that pattern up. Just looking at it on screen from here and from this distance, it gives it somewhat of that pattern. So it kind of gives that ball effect. So you don't have to be, especially on something where you're, that ball is probably going to be about that big on your finished design.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to 100%, right? Yeah. It's going to be like an inch tall, maybe.
Exactly. So looking at that, you're not going to be able to get that much detail. If it was a jacket back, that's different. But you're not going to be able to get every little dimple of a ball in real life size and proportions. So just to infer something's there, a lot of times that's the best route in embroidery. Just not to add too many stitches, not to create problems with overlapping stitches with thread breaks, thread fraying, and whatnot. But yeah, and those are 2 things that you could do.
Cindy says, would you use a highlight gray for the texture? So you could even do that if you wanted to. You could just go like a couple shades lighter.
Yeah, like a real silvery light gray, just to kind of give it that much more dimension. That kind of looks like it's kind of a shadow effect.
Yeah, and now we're really starting to hit into the artistic medium of interpretation. How are you going to interpret a golf ball versus how Justin will or I will? There's no right or wrong answer. There's just a lot of different answers that would achieve the same effect, but be completely different from the ground up.
Right, exactly. And you could dive deep into, there's certain elements of Wilcom where you could actually go in and program fill patterns to a T on how you want the shape, size, spacing, and whatnot. So if you really, really wanted to get in depth into a golf ball, that's something that's a good size where you could actually see that element come to life, you can get into something like that if you want to dive deep into textures and motifs and stuff.
If I was doing golf balls every day, all day, I'd be doing that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be going that far down the rabbit hole, but I don't do enough golf balls to justify going that far down the rabbit hole yet.
Right.
Maybe you do. So, I don't know. How many golf balls do you do?
I don't remember the last time I did a golf ball in a design, actually.
Okay. Boom.
So that's the design. I'm going to take out that texture in the file that we send you, just so you can use something in your software that's compatible with your software. Let's see what you come up with, whether you're doing it by hand or just using some light fills, different stitch directions, trying to do opposite directions, kind of make it look like a cross hatching, maybe a little bit tighter weave.
Because if you do the exact, and here's something too to point out, is if you do the exact same stitch angle of something that you want to be textured over the top as you do the ball underneath, it's going to sink in. So you make sure you're alternating stitch angles so that it sits on top of each other and doesn't fade in.
Also, I am going to take out that Florentine fill just because it does sound like you're leaning towards that direction as far as doing some type of top fill to it. So I'll adjust that later. I don't want you to run into, depending on what you choose as far as your top and that curved effect where, like we were saying, depending on how sharp those curves, those areas could get a little dense. So if you're coming back on top of it with 2 layers of a light fill, don't want you to have those thread breaks, those thread fraying or anything like that. So I will give you a regular fill on that. I think Jeff has your information, JR. I will get him the DST file and we'll get it over to you and let us know, post in the group, see how it turns out for you.
Awesome. Well, that fully hit an hour.
Nice.
We'll go ahead and do that. So we're officially 1 minute and 28 seconds into, well, it's not bonus time until we're at 15 minutes. Bonus time
is that the rule?
Minutes. Yeah, now it's just like overtime, and then bonus time is when you hit 15 minutes or more. So we'll strive for bonus time next time.
There you go.
But no, that was really good to watch. Hopefully you guys were able to pick up some from it, and I'm definitely interested to see what you do with it when you throw your spin on it, JR. I think that'll be really cool, and I do have his contact information, so we can get that file over to him. But
awesome.
Anything else you want to throw on here at the end, Justin?
No, I think that's it. It was cool. It was designed to work on, and sometimes the day-to-day rat race of getting designs done, they all blend together, but you kind of get that one design that kind of perks you up and like, oh, this is kind of cool. I always get that way when it comes to 3D Puff. When a 3D Puff design comes across and it's not just a letter with an outline like it usually is. I usually like those things to come to life, especially when it's a customer that posts on social media, all their stuff. I love seeing it on hats and stuff. It's just cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I guess with that, I don't really have any news coming up. We've got the virtual applique getaway coming up that I'm going to be teaching at, and so we'll add them. I think that's all of the news. I'm like really leapfrogging ahead here. But with that, everybody, we've got Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios. I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works, and we're both here representing the Embroidery Nerd. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we will talk to you again next time.
Good night, guys.